All right, good afternoon, everyone. Um, Greetings, and we thank you for joining us for how to identify significant savings in technology costs while improving your resiliency and service. We're going to tackle some big questions today and that are facing higher education, as you can see on the screen. So our goal is to be responsive to your time and help tackle some of these questions that hopefully you'll find important and beneficial to you. My name is David Hunter. I'm the Executive Director for Transition Services at Dynamic Campus. And to ensure that we get a variety of perspectives on these issues, I'm honored to be joined today by two senior financial executives from higher education to today's panel. I'd like to welcome Donna Nance, Vice President of Finance and Administration from Texas Wesleyan University in Fort Worth, Texas, and Barb Sands, Associate Vice President and Interim Chief Financial Officer at Greenville University in Greenville, Illinois. We welcome both of you to our panel today. And both of these universities have partnered with Dynamic Campus for fully outsourced IT. And we want to thank both of you for joining our webcast today. We're going to cover a number of issues in our time together, but we know that we won't get to everything that you're interested in. So we've set aside some time at the end to answer some questions. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have in the Q&A section. And if you see a question there that you like, you can hit the thumbs up to upvote it, and we'll make sure that we answer questions that are most popular. Additionally, the slides from today's presentation will be made available, as will the recording, so that you can reference those at a later date. Please note that your name will be attached to any questions that you ask, and it will be visible to others in attendance. So again, thank you for joining, and let's talk a little bit about who Dynamic Campus is. So Dynamic Campus, you might ask, what qualifies us to speak about higher education information technology and identify opportunities for savings? Simply put, the things that we're going to talk about today is all that Dynamic Campus has been doing since 2002. We've supported technology needs of more than 300 higher education institutions nationwide since we got started, helping them get more bang for their technology buck. We focus heavily on small, private, faith-based universities, organizations like many of you that are in attendance today. Now, I think it's important to note that we don't do anything but offer strategic and technology support services, and we have no financial relationships with any hardware, software, or service companies. Our sole focus is finding and implementing the best solution for your specific needs, period. We aren't aligned with any particular software or hardware vendors. We simply put, we're going to do the best we can for your institution. At the same time, we are the largest fully independent provider of IT outsourcing and technology support services, ensuring that you have the technology skills and scale you need when you need it, and it's gone when you don't need it. So driving IT efficiency and effectiveness for higher education has been our sole mission, and it's fair to say that's needed more than ever as we sit in a critical point in time for the industry as a whole. So let's dive right in. This slide here, let's first talk a little bit about what colleges and universities should be spending for IT. As you look at the graph on the left from Deloitte and Wall Street Journal, you'll see that this kind of spans all of the industries in IT spending. You'll see that education is third from the top. It spends roughly just a little under 6% of the budget for IT. If you look at the right side of the screen, this is data from EDUCAUSE's core data service, and it tells us that the average central IT spend for colleges and universities is 4.5%, but if you look specifically at undergrad institutions, they spend around 4.7%, and master's granting institutions average around 4.8%, respectively. Now it's important to note that this spending data from EDUCAUSE is only for central IT costs. It does not include distributed costs if you have a non-centralized IT shop. So what does that mean for an institution? This data breaks down the EDUCAUSE information just a little bit more. And what you'll see here is that it breaks it down into all institutions. It breaks it down into associate granting, bachelor's granting, master's, and doctorate granting. But the key is, if you, just to give an idea, if you have a roughly 2,500 students at your campus, say roughly 250 faculty and staff, your budget would be around 4.1 million is what you would expect to spend in IT. So this hopefully tells us a little bit more about what IT costs would be. Now, Barb and Donna come from institutions on both ends of the spectrum. Barb, would you tell us a little bit about where Greenville came from? And then Donna, would you tell us a little bit about where Texas Wesleyan came from when it came to the spending side of IT?
Sure. We were an institution that was operating more on a shoestring budget, so we fell way below the standard that you reflect in the data here. And so a number of years we had been cutting budget costs, and unfortunately IT was one of those. When we cut across campus, they were affected as well. And so it really hindered our growth potential in an IT situation.
Okay, thank you. Donna.
Yeah, so at Texas Wesleyan, we were, as David mentioned, on the opposite end of that spectrum, in that we were spending more than that. When we first began looking at ways that we could try to tackle our IT costs, we were looking at several different benchmarks of the EDUCAUSE data, and found that in almost every benchmark that we looked at, including this one on the total spend, that we were approaching double or more than double on what the benchmarks would be. And so we knew at that point in time that there was something significant that we needed to do with regards to our IT spend.
Yeah, well, and just I think a good follow-up question, looking at both of your spending trajectories, were you satisfied with the services you were getting out of IT? Obviously something came to mind that led you down the path that you were going.
I would say for Greenville, we were basically in maintenance mode, and probably under that, we needed a much more level of expertise because we lacked the innovation, we lacked the ever-changing needs and upgrades in technology. So we were way behind in some of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and for Texas Wesleyan, that was part of our frustration, is that we weren't getting the service that we had hoped that we would get, given this kind of investment into IT. And so it was really kind of twofold. Not only were we spending more than our peer institutions, we were also not satisfied with the services. And so it's kind of we had two things working against us, and really needed to find a better solution of the service. What we heard a lot from our IT staff was no, no, and no. And you know, that gets frustrating. Sometimes the answer can't be no.
Yeah.
So how are we going to do it?
Yeah. Thank you. And, you know, I think that leads us into this next slide. You know, as we look at trying to get what we need out of IT, if you look at this graph, on the right-hand side are the lists of positions and skill sets that are kind of the old school positions that we saw in IT director, report writers, things like that. And on the left are the newer positions, basically the skill sets that are needed to do that. So let's start with Donna and then Barb. Where were you seeing a skills gap in your IT institutions, and how did it manifest itself?
Yeah, so we were an institution that had a lot of staff, and their job descriptions looked very much of what you see on the right-hand side. And yet we still weren't being able to get the services that our departments were needing, nor were we able to kind of take that kind of future look. It was all about the immediate or trying to resolve yesterday's problems. We just really didn't feel like we were positioned appropriately to be able to go where the institution was needing to go looking forward.
Okay.
Greenville probably experienced very similar circumstances there, just on a lower budget. The job positions there on the right are very familiar to Greenville. And we, of course, didn't even have that many positions. And the level of service was, like I said, more of a maintenance mode, but still not at a satisfactory level. And, you know, no growth potential there at all, lack of innovation. I would say most of our IT staff was self-taught with a lot of different programming positions there. And so when we needed that level of expertise to help fix something in one of our database management systems, it just wasn't there. They would fix it, but then no one else behind them could come in and correct anything because it was an add-on outside of the company parameters. And so, you know, that hindered some things as well. And then that led us to Dynamic Campus, again, with that level of expertise and growth development and just the innovative nature that you all provide. And that has been so beneficial already.
Great. Well, and both of you ladies bring up a great point. You know, the number of skill sets on the left is increasing, and it's different than they were in the past. But it's important to remember, and I think you pointed this out, Barb, that you might need a certain skill set for a period of time, but you don't need them all the time. You need them when you need them, and then you don't need them. And so it becomes difficult to have that large pool of skill set at an institution. Particularly, it becomes expensive as you're trying to keep those people all year when you may only need them for a small project or an initiative. Now, we saw some institutions that we've partnered with that have gone out and they've hired contractors for these sorts of situations, but this is an expensive model, and we found that it often led them to inconsistent results. And this is where the Dynamic Campus Shared Services model becomes very powerful. What you'll see in this graph here is Dynamic Campus has a group of subject matter experts that provide service to all of our partners. This chart here that you're looking at shows the number of years experience that our subject matter experts have in each of the areas shown. The SMEs, as we call them, are highly skilled and vetted, and they only service our partners. Instead of worrying, from your standpoint, instead of worrying where you need to get the skill set from and for any particular project, our partners are able to draw upon the extensive expertise of our shared services team whenever they need at no additional cost. Both Barb and Donna have seen how shared services teams can impact the effectiveness of IT. Now, Barb and Donna, do you have any examples or experiences that you would like to share of how shared services would benefit those in attendance today?
Sure. Our use of the shared services has really been in many different ways, but probably the one that has affected just operational efficiency has been with a business process analysis. And so the Dynamic Campus Shared Services staff would partner with our departmental staff and really take a look at how well the department was using the system. We were on Wesleyan's colleague system. And so really determine how much we were using of the system, were we using it correctly if we were using it, and really assist us in using that system more efficiently, more effectively. It really helped in this kind of paradigm shift where our departments never thought of the colleague system as theirs. They thought of it as an IT system. And it really gave them the skills that they needed in order to be kind of the experts with their data and their processes. And so the BPAs, as David mentioned earlier, while it may be time intensive with the shared services person for a period of time, but when we're done, then the shared services staff would go away and work on somebody else's project. So it's not something that we would need all the time, but they're there when we do need it.
Okay, great.
We just completed our business process analysis just recently and had our first meeting with executives all together to go through that. I say book, it's a little thick, but it was so full of information from the results of what their team investigated from each office and the different systems that are used, how they're being utilized, as Donna said. And there were a lot of redundancies that were revealed in that process. And so we are just now beginning to, I would say, clean up some of those and make our processes much more efficient, more effective, just in an overall arching way across campus. And unfortunately, some of those offices were right next door to each other, running very similar reports and didn't even know it. And so that business process analysis is very enlightening to the staff.
Good. Well, thank you, ladies, both for doing that. And I think it's important to note there was no additional cost for this. The beauty of it was our CIOs at your sites were able to just say, hey, we need a business process analysis. They don't come to you asking for any money. It's just part of the contract. It's a fixed cost contract, and we come in and we do these things. They come when you need them and when you don't. Now, you might ask yourself, well, what does that look like? You might be on the call today going, what does that look like for me? Well, let's take a look here at this page here. This slide shows the transformation of the IT team at Texas Wesleyan University. When we first got there at Texas Wesleyan, there were 30 staff on site. And as Donna mentioned earlier, they were well above all of the benchmarks that EDUCAUSE had set for size of IT team and all that, and they weren't satisfied with what they were getting. Over the first year of time, that team has changed. As you look at the right, the team on the right represents what's going on at Texas Wesleyan today. We have 16 on-site personnel who leverage 18 or more of our shared service staff. These are the subject matter experts we talked about before. And Donna has been able to realize roughly a 20% decrease in her overall IT budget with improved service levels and that. So Donna, can you talk a little bit about the shift from this larger group to the little group? And I think it would be interesting to maybe share some of the anxiety that maybe you experienced as leadership, because going from what you're used to something different, which is change, humans don't like change. So maybe would you share a little bit with us what that transition was like, the good, bad, and the ugly?
Sure. Well, I mean, our gut would tell us, and the data would tell us, that we were overstaffed. But as time goes on, and knowing that campus was not satisfied with the IT services, the answer to that was add more staff or add more resources, add another contract. And we were doing that and still not getting the services. And so we knew that when we moved to the partnership with Dynamic Campus, that it would most likely result in a reduction in staff. And there was, some faith that we had to put into that transition, that we really could reduce staff and increase services. That definitely had not been the mindset prior to Dynamic Campus. But I think you could very easily talk with anybody around campus and they would all agree the service that we're getting from IT is much improved and really thought of as a partner. They reach out wanting IT to be a partner with them as they're trying to determine how to resolve an issue, and instead trying to not wanting to avoid them, which was somewhat of the environment beforehand. So it was definitely a leap of faith, but what we have found is such a huge improvement in the service to campus, even with the reduced staff. And a lot of that has to do with the shared services model.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, thanks, Donna, and would you say that there was maybe some angst amongst leadership and faculty and staff during this transition?
Oh, absolutely. This was a pretty big service to outsource completely. We outsource our groundskeeping or custodial or food service. Those are pretty typical. There's not a lot of schools that completely outsource their IT. It definitely made a lot of sense for us because of the amount of resources that we were putting in IT. We could no longer afford to do that, but yet we also needed to increase the services. And so it seems a little bit counterintuitive, the thought that we could reduce staff and yet increase services. So there was definitely some angst in doing that. We also had staff that had been with the university for years and years, and we were concerned, with their future. Part of our relationship with Dynamic Campus is that they agreed to take on those staff. And so there was definitely some leaps of faith. There was definitely some unknowns, but Dynamic Campus was definitely there as a partner, helping us deal with each of the issues.
Okay, thank you. Now, and that's a great example. And obviously, Donna, as we've talked about, you showed that you were overstaffed. Now, if we kind of take a shift here, Barb, Greenville has been with Dynamic Campus for a little over 7.5 months. And you obviously came from the opposite end of the spectrum. And this kind of answers a question that was posed in the Q&A about an example of transitioning a smaller institution with an IT staff under 15, which really is kind of Greenville University. Can you tell us a little bit, Barb, what you've seen over that time? Because obviously your IT staff didn't really shrink. But tell us a little bit about what the experience was at Greenville transitioning to this model.
Yeah. Donna and I could probably share similar stories in just the word change and what that means. Of course, we're a small rural community, and you rub shoulders with each other at the grocery store, sit by each other at church. And so the impact that it had on the community was probably pretty devastating to some. And we had employees who had been with the university for a number of years as well. And some chose to stay and others left. But our services have increased immensely. And the impact, I think if you were to interview some of the ones that were very unsure of the decision that was made to partner with Dynamic Campus, I would hope that they would say today it was the right decision. And it was one the leadership team took a significant amount of time to really discuss and research and really get a grasp on what that meant, how that would impact our budget. And just, do we need that type of service? And the answer was always, yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I remember I was in an interview with Robert, and I said, we can't afford not to do this. Mm-hmm. And so it just made sense. And I would say our service has increased overall. There was a lot of excitement, especially with those who knew we were going to be able to clean up systems. We're a Genzabar EX user, and so we did a complete conversion 5 years ago, and that didn't go so well. And so, again, a shout out to the shared services team. We've been able to work through some of those issues and are currently working through the remaining ones, and just look forward to continued partnership as we shore up some of those systems in place.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's worth mentioning from where I stand, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, as Executive Director of Transition Services, I've been heavily involved at both Texas Wesleyan and Greenville. The staff size at Greenville was around 10 or 11 when we got there, and the staff sizes remained the same, or roughly the same. We've seen a little bit of turnover. Some people have chosen to leave, some people haven't. And like you said, some have stayed. But I think the big thing we've seen at Greenville is the addition of these shared services folks, as you've mentioned. Now it's not just the on-site staff. You're now leveraging all of those things. And what probably is different at Greenville than at Texas Wesleyan is, while Texas Wesleyan saw a significant savings in their overall IT spend, Greenville hasn't. But what they've seen is, with some increase in IT spending, they've seen a dramatic increase in the amount of skill sets that they have available to them, as well as the ability to do things. So with that, I appreciate you sharing that. I want to give folks on the line a little bit of a flavor of what some of these savings can look like. Now, in my role as Executive Director of Transition Services, I work closely with any of our new partners. And at the beginning of any partnership, we leverage our extensive and broad knowledge of higher education IT to look closely at budgets and areas where we can find opportunities to save. And with decades of cumulative experience, we're able to, with over 300 clients, we're able to know what to look for. And as you think about that, think about being a CIO at a site. Many times the institutions that we partner with, the CIOs we've found as we've talked to them, they feel like they're on an island. And once we get into the dynamic campus, we call it the dynamic campus family for a reason, because our CIOs talk to one another. They're able to reach out to each other with questions, and we meet frequently. And it's through these partnerships and that we're able to leverage this experience to identify areas for savings. So I want to talk a little bit about just 3 examples of savings that we've seen at some of our institutions. Now, one of our partners was paying for a service, and they were paying for a service to basically do account creation and maintenance. Now, as we looked at that, we said that is a service that should be done internal to IT. And definitely we have that experience within Dynamic Campus. And if the local staff didn't have it, we would train them because they should be able to easily do that. Well, we were able to cancel that contract, and that will be an almost $82,000 a year annual savings. Now, Barb, this was something we were looking at Greenville. What are your thoughts to this? I mean, as you look at from the CFO standpoint, you obviously were given this contract some time ago, and now we're saying, hey, let's get rid of it. What are your thoughts along those lines? I mean, as a CFO, you don't know IT. I mean, you have to trust people, right?
Right. I think that goes back to what Donna was saying earlier. There are some unknowns. And so that is one of those leaps of faith that you trust. Dynamic Campus is supposed to be the experts in these fields. And so you trust that they know our needs greater than we do. But that's just one example. We've seen so many other contracts that we were paying for services that we weren't receiving. And, our copier contracts, I mean, I could keep listing them. Dave, you probably have the list as well.
I do.
And even with the budget savings, we've been able to use those savings to put toward our hardware needs that were lacking as well, because some of our systems were completely outdated and not supported anymore by the vendors. And so that's been able to free up some of those resources to just put somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Great. And we're going to talk hardware, and I'm going to ask for a little input from Donna. To give an example on hardware, we saw at another site where a vendor, and it's unfortunate that sometimes vendors, and that's the beauty of Dynamic Campus being vendor agnostic, we find that some vendors who are selling stuff will sometimes oversell. Because if they sell you something bigger, that they might sell you a big bulldozer when you really need a shovel. Well, we saw this in hardware. We saw firewalls that were sold to a university that had 7 times the capacity of the internet capability of the university, and they were paying through the nose for something that was so oversized that they didn't need. So we were able to leverage our shared services expertise. They came in, they were able to right size. We found new firewalls that provided additional functionality, that provided additional security for a total savings of about $320,000 over the next 3 years. Now, Barb mentioned something about kind of repurposing dollars, and Donna, maybe you can speak a little bit about that. As we look at these savings, we often try and be creative and say, hey, we can save money here so that we can fix something there. Do you mind talking a little bit about that, Donna, how sometimes the creativity comes in on that?
Sure. So, there's the hard line of the actual budget savings total dollars in IT that was reduced for Wesleyan. But also, in addition to that, there is, as David and Barb mentioned, kind of repurposing some of the budget dollars that you do have. So as we would have some of these savings and contracts, it's using those dollars to a higher priority kind of need. One of the things that Dynamic Campus has really helped us do is really figure out a kind of long-term strategy of how to fund some of the equipment replacements that we have to do just to stay current. And, in the past, those would be either surprises or a big dollar amount that we were going to have to figure out how we were going to fund in a particular year. And so with Dynamic Campus's help, we've been able to really find a way of being able to do a long-term budget review of when certain contracts come due, we've been able to lease some of the equipment and kind of do it in pieces so that we can have a kind of a replacement refresh schedule however long that we need, and yet not have huge influxes in the amount of budget resources that we need. And so Dynamic Campus has been really instrumental in helping us set up that kind of long-term view as to what kind of resources we're going to need to fund IT.
Great. And I think that's a good example. We want to try and make it as easy to budget for so you don't have surprises. The last example I want to share here is software. So all of our institutions, particularly you attending today, we all have to have some sort of ERP or student information system. Now, as we looked at one of our clients, we were able to go out and quickly identify, based upon our knowledge, that they were overpaying in the annual maintenance. I know most of us, particularly CFOs on this call, as you get your annual ERP maintenance bill, I'm sure you cringe, as most of us do, because it's a big dollar amount. So we were able to look at this as compared to what we were seeing elsewhere. And we went in and we were able to negotiate with Wesleyan and receive additional components that the university had been wanting. And we saved almost $54,000 in the first year, and we'll have a total savings of $345,000 over the 5-year term. Now, this negotiation took place in mid-contract. This institution was in the middle of a 5-year contract, and we renegotiated a new 5-year with these savings. So a lot of times it's having that expertise, the knowledge, and those things, we're able to come in and do that. And again, I think it goes to what Donna said about trying to strategically level the spend and figure things out. Now, these are just kind of 3 examples of what I hope will give everyone a flavor of the skills and expertise we bring to bear to cut your IT budget while maintaining and improving service. So I'd like to kick from here into specifically some questions and answer with our 2 experts today, Donna and Barb. And so let's jump right into some questions. So Barb and Donna, almost every institution here is looking for ways to cut costs and maximize their financial flexibility given the expectations of what's ahead for the next several years, particularly given COVID. With that in mind, we've gathered up some questions and topics that we think would be good to answer for the panel and to do some Q&A. So the first question we have here is, what were some of the factors that led you and your leadership team to consider outsourcing your IT function?
For Greenville, we had seen a lot of turnover in our admissions area over the last few years. And when who is now our acting president, when she took over admissions at that time and began asking for historical data and look back periods and talking to the registrar's office, financial aid, comparing that with the admissions team, the numbers were not consistent. And so just trying to figure out who's right, who's wrong, which system is right. Of course, we use Salesforce, and then there's PowerFades, and then there's Genzabar EX on the advising side and the registrar side. And so just knowing that, what's our retention rate, looking at all those factors that impact budgets, there was too much inconsistency, which was not efficient or effective for anyone on campus. And so when we began looking at how to resolve this, Dynamic Campus rose to the forefront. And then in our research, that's when we decided, okay, we can't afford, that's when I said earlier, we can't afford not to make this decision. So something had to change, and it was all centered around our IT needs.
Okay, great. And Donna, I know you talked a little bit earlier about benchmarking, and so maybe you don't have a whole lot more to say, but.
Yeah, I would say we were in a situation where we needed to make some pretty significant operating budget reductions. And it was beyond we needed to do something more than just across the board cuts, that we really needed to take a deep dive. And so we started looking at various different areas, trying to figure out where we might be over-investing, so to speak. And that's what led us to doing the benchmark reviews with EDUCAUSE. And then when you kind of paired that up with the kind of unsatisfactory service that we felt like we were getting out of IT, those 2 things together kind of really put us in a situation that we were going to have to figure out really some real solutions to how we were going to deal with our IT, not only just the spend, but also the service.
Perfect. Well, and let's dive in, Donna. Let's have you take a first stab at this question. How is IT helping your institutions be more efficient and effective, particularly today?
Yeah, and I think for the most part, I would kind of go back to the discussion that we had on the business process analysis. It's really creating an environment in our departments where they become the experts of their data and their processes, that it's truly a paradigm shift. And part of what we're seeing right now are a lot of increases in for reports, because they're now seeing, oh, we are capturing this data, and this data potentially could help us make decisions. And so we've completed a business process analysis in financial aid, in our bursar's office, and in human resources and registrar's office. And so they're all in various different phases of that analysis. But I kind of envision that business process analysis kind of like layers of an onion. I don't know that you do it once and you're completely done. It's perhaps you do it the first time and it's really painful, because it's as Barb mentioned, the report is pretty thick of all the things that need to be done. And so you identify what needs to be done. You put in with Dynamic Campus kind of this project management of how we're going to implement these improvements, and then you implement them over time. And so I would imagine once we can kind of get through the whole various different areas, that maybe there's some areas that we go back and redo, because some of it is just kind of a baseline. Like our human resources, I think we're pretty much doing a re-implementation of the system. Not all areas were to that state, but it really has let the departments own their data and their processes that I think and we're already starting to lead to better decision-making based on the data that we can get out of the system.
Great, thank you. Barb, did you have any thoughts?
Yes, I wanted to add that in all those different systems, none of them really talk to one another. So nothing is really integrated, even though you think they are. But when you ask for a report, and like Donna said, we're utilizing more reports to do more data analytics that we've not had at our fingertips in the past. And I mean, to drive the institution forward, we have to be analyzing our data. But to get that data was, well, how soon do you need it? I can probably have it to you in a couple of weeks, because it's a manual process. And that was the answer across campus was, well, that's a manual process. Well, that's a manual process. And again, it's not efficient, it's not effective. And so this business process analysis has helped us identify what those inconsistencies are and what systems are not communicating with each other, and eliminating what we don't need in some of those redundancies, but giving us platforms or systems that actually work and will work to our advantage, and eliminate budget costs and just provide a much more efficient and streamlined process. And so that's been very beneficial to see in that business process analysis results.
Wonderful. And let's jump into a kind of a really relevant question right now. And we'll start with you, Barb. So as you think about how has IT outsourcing impacted your institution during this coronavirus crisis?
When the governor of Illinois made the mandate to move education online, some of our faculty had never even taught an online class before. And so, like several institutions, we extended our spring break because it was right at that cutoff when that announcement came with the mandate to shut down. And so we were able to take that week, and IT Dynamic Campus was instrumental in making that happen. And there was no lapse in services from our students, or from a student standpoint or perspective. And so, it was just basically eliminating the classroom and moving to online. So they made sure all of our faculty had Zoom accounts that didn't expire after 40 minutes in some of those areas. But it was wonderful having them talk about timely. If it would have been our IT staff, I'm not sure we would have been able to get all of that accomplished in the short amount of time that we had.
Okay. Donna, how about you? What was your experience?
I don't know what we would have done if Dynamic Campus wasn't working with us. we had a very similar situation. We decided really towards the end of our spring break that we were going to have to move all of our classes to a virtual environment. And Dynamic Campus was very instrumental in supporting our Center for Teaching and Learning. We had scheduled a week-long kind of training sessions for all of our faculty. And so Dynamic Campus was instrumental in supporting that. When we got back from our spring break, we decided we were going to move staff. And I think within probably a day and a half, if not 2 days, Dynamic Campus had helped all of our staff move to remote working from home. And you know, and in addition to the staff side, there was also the student perspective. So what students began, you know, logging in and doing because we also extended spring break, that we found out that students may not have had computers or may not have had internet connection. And so our Dynamic Campus was working very closely with our VP for Student Affairs and with our provost of identifying those students that were needing the additional technology support and helping them find solutions, you know, figuring out what kind of internet service provider they have. And maybe it was that we had to loan them a computer or a tablet and actually getting that to the student. You know, there were just so many various different scenarios that Dynamic Campus was really there to support the students and the services that they needed, but also faculty and staff.
Perfect. Thanks. And let's jump into another question I think that's relevant. As we think about budgets and the tightness of budget now with COVID-19, and many institutions are looking at budget shortfalls due to the impact of, you know, potentially lower attendance. How has the impact of outsourcing, what impact has it had on your budgeting process? Just thinking about the process from before and after. And let's go ahead and start with Donna. How's that changed your budgeting process?
Well, as I mentioned before, the efforts that we've done in being able to do more of a long-term or strategic look at what our IT spend needs to be, Dynamic Campus has been instrumental in helping us do that. Also, just having the transparency of where we're spending our dollars. You know, is it dollars that we're spending in the classroom, or is it related to the administrative costs of IT? Just all the various different categories. How much are we spending on the help desk and the support of the help desk services? So there's definitely a lot more transparency in our IT budgets, and that helps us be strategic. Where should we be spending our money?
Great, thanks. Barb, what are your thoughts?
It has been so helpful to have the spreadsheet that our CIO has put together, just to know when those contracts are being renewed and what the long-term costs are for the next 5 or 6 years out from a budget standpoint. And of course, this year, seeing a lot of those savings already implemented. And I know when we partnered with Dynamic Campus in the beginning and they started doing the inventory and seeing our hardware needs, I wondered where in the world we were going to get all of this money to upgrade those IT needs. And because of the savings, as I mentioned earlier, we've been able to repurpose those dollars and purchase some hardware that we never thought possible with our limited budget resources. So that's been extremely helpful. And I know our CIO is currently working with some other contracts and eliminating some of those even more so. So I look forward to more savings and that will impact the budget.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. I think transparency seems to be a theme. I think it's important, even though you're not IT experts, you're budgeting for the university as a whole, and you need to have a general understanding of what's being spent in IT and why. So that's great. Now, one last question we had here is, how has access to the national or our shared services team affected your institution? You've given some examples previously, but let's start with you, Barb, and then Donna. Maybe anything additional you'd like to say on how shared services has impacted and affected your institution.
I think with the business process analysis, I will just add this from what I said earlier. I think our department's eyes were opened, the various ones that participated in that process. And one of my employees moved over to financial aid recently, and she has a lot of database management expertise. And so I think with her level that she's at as an employee working with these shared service experts, I mean, she just lit up. And so I think that made a huge impact on those various departments, because we all look to her on campus to help fix our problems with our databases when IT is busy. But now that we have Dynamic Campus and that shared service, that has just heightened that resource and has really got some excitement going on campus, and in departments that have never experienced that before. It's been a lot of information control. Mm-hmm. And so I think with her excitement about this process and how we can streamline things and make them more efficient, it's really affected and impacted the other departments in a very positive way.
Great. How about you, Donna? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time talking about the business process analysis, and while that's obviously very important, I think that perhaps some of the other areas where we've used shared services may not be specifically to a colleague, right? So our admissions office uses a product called Radius, and that was an area that we had some struggles with early on. Mm-hmm. to Dynamic Campus. And they were willing and able to put in a lot of resources to assist us in the integrations between Radius and Colleague. We have several kind of third parties or outside of Colleague systems that feed into Colleague. And so I think shared services has been able to assist in providing the expertise. I think one of the best things that we get from Dynamic Campus is not only the depth of experience and knowledge that they have, but with the shared services also gives you the breadth of knowledge. And so you get some ideas of what other institutions are doing. It's kind of just a close network that you get access to find out what other schools are doing and how they're tackling kind of similar kinds of issues.
Great. Those are great examples. So, most of institutions today, I think they think of IT as a cost center. Sometimes we think of it as just an expense. And so we've talked a little bit about how IT has added value and become part of a strategic advantage for you. I think, just to summarize what both of you said, I think IT, Donna, you mentioned earlier how the answer was always no. We at Dynamic Campus feel that IT should be the department of yes. Sometimes you're going to ask for something that's really difficult, and we're going to say, yes, we can do that, but here are some things you might need to understand, and then do you still really want to do it? Or, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. Let's prioritize it and get it done. And, you've both given great examples of how hopefully IT, as people can see, is not just a cost center, but it actually should be a strategic partner with the institution to help them achieve their institutional priorities and goals. So we appreciate all the examples you've provided up to this point. So Dynamic Campus, all of us at Dynamic Campus have been dedicated to higher education for the last 18 years, and we're committed to doing what we can to use our expertise to help institutions like yours not just survive, but thrive for the next 18 years and more. So we're offering for all attendees today, if you're interested, we're offering a complimentary IT cost savings estimate to help you find opportunities like the ones we've been discussing here. Just email us at info@dynamiccampus.com, and we will get started with a 30-minute kickoff call and hopefully help you identify some areas where you can save money. Now let's see if we can address a question or two that have come up during today's webinar. So we had a great question coming in from Ann Wood. And Ann asks, what do you think was the biggest barrier of your former approach to IT being successful? BPA and improvement in departmental use of technology and data, and why wasn't this being addressed formerly? So either Barb or Donna, do you want to take a stab at that? So obviously, you know, what was your biggest barrier in your former approach, and why weren't you able to address it in the past?
I can share one thing. I think part of that was difference in leadership. And some of it, we just assumed IT knew what they needed, and we really didn't ask the important questions. And I think with so many things in technology changing, and like I said, change in admissions director, knowing what to look at, what not to look at. I mean, we've been an institution that we've kind of limped along year by year and didn't really look at long-term planning for our IT specific needs. And so, I mean, Dynamic Campus has already given us dashboards that we've never had before. I have a meeting this week with some of Dynamic Campus shared services with our CIO to go through some of the financial dashboards that I need and can have access to, and our board members can have access to. And so I think some of it is just not knowing what questions to ask. And now that things are changing and we see the importance of that that's why it never happened in the past, unfortunately.
Okay. Donna, any thoughts?
Sure, and I think from us, for Wesleyan, I would say it's partly a leadership issue. It's also, it's a change in mindset. It's not IT for IT's sake. IT really is a support service for what the educational goals were or are. And that was really something that was missing for us. The answer for us formally, if it was an IT issue, was that we've got to have more money, we got to have more staff, instead of really focusing in on how we can use the resources the best that we can. I think David's example of some of the things that IT was outsourcing, well, that's an IT function, you know? And so really our IT staff became our functional experts instead of the departments becoming a functional expert. So it was really the kind of the leadership and ensuring we had the right people doing the right things. So I really felt like before our IT staff, you know, they were just kind of spinning. And the decisions that were made were more for the sake of IT instead of for the sake of whatever the initiative was.
Okay, that's great. And kind of to follow up on that, you know, I think kind of, and maybe I'm reading into what both of you ladies are saying, but as we looked back at a previous slide, we kind of compared the before and after IT structure. And we talked about kind of the old positions, and we talked about what the new critical positions are. Would you say that maybe you were lacking some of the skill sets you need on site to accomplish things, and that with shifting to a shared services model has impacted that? Did that make a change in what you were able to do? Or was that maybe part of the reason why you weren't able to address issues in the past? Was a skill set gap?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that there was definitely a gap in the skills that was needed.
Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you, ladies. That has been wonderful. Do we have any other questions out there? I want to make sure that we get any questions answered that folks want. We've got just a couple more minutes here. If I don't see anything else come in, I first of all just want to thank both Donna and Barb for attending today and giving their expertise. You know, they both have the creative pixie dust, or whatever you want to call it, that makes an institution financially solvent. And I think it's important to have those skills and to be able to do that. It's more than just balancing a checkbook like you and I do on day to day. Well, just looking at that, one last question. Sandy Mooney asked if the slides from today's presentation will be available. Yes, they will. Following the presentation, it will take us a little bit to get the video closed captioned and cleaned up, and we'll make that available to those who attended, slides in the video as well. So it looks like that's all the time we've got today. We'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedules to join us today. And again, a special thanks to Barb and Donna for their insights. If you'd like a transcript from today's session, just email us at info@dynamiccampus.com. And we wish everybody a safe and healthy summer as we plan for a successful fall 2020 start. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day.